And this is the last meeting for this one, and then the next one we're just gonna move to. I don't know if everybody's got their copy, but the your next five moves.
Awesome.
Um, I guess I'll start real quick. I really like the ending of this book. I highlighted a lot, but like the things that the main thing that got my attention was and it was like reflected in the story of the guy that became an astronaut after everything, and then the little story at the end of the actual Adam Grant of the actual author, which was like basically basically he's saying like, okay, you put in an application and there's your qualifications, and a lot of people are gonna look over it, right? Okay, he doesn't have the qualifications we need, or they already judge your application based on what you think you'll be able to do in the future, but they never look back at the stuff you've done along the way or like the adversity you've gone through along the way. When I was reading at the first part of the astronaut guy story, Jose, and then it kind of just left me there like, oh, he didn't make it. I was like, oh, that sucks, and I moved on with a couple pages or a couple chapters or whatever, and then it shows his picture in the back, like, oh, he ended up making it after like all these years of applying. I smiled because I was like that's really effing cool, you know? Like I'm like, that's cool that he actually made it after all these times. He literally was like, no, like this is my dream, this is what I want. And even at the end of that, or like where the page where his picture's at, let me see if I can find it real quick. The page where his picture's at, it says he had to break the mold to make it through the broken system, right? And literally, before I even read that line, I was like, he wouldn't have had that opportunity if he had not just continued to do it. Like he's literally gotten like 8 rejection letters, and he's like, I'm gonna send another one. I'm gonna send another one, like literally every 2 years. And right before I got to that part, I was like, there's no way anybody would do this. Like nobody's gonna make it that far if they didn't have that perseverance and like the putting applying the pressure as much as this guy did. And then it literally said he had to break the mold to make it through the broken system. He's the exception, but he should be the rule. I put a little heart next to it because I really like his story. And then with the author, when he's like interviewing and he pulls out his deck of cards and he's just showing like all this stuff to the guy, like, yeah, I'll show you the trick, and I don't care how you do it. How did you learn it? Oh, I just taught myself. And then at the end he's like, I chose you not because of like your application or whatever, but because during the interview I saw that like, oh, you have that mindset of like, I'm gonna teach myself. And then whenever he said that he had failed his writing assignment or something and he had to take like the remedial class, and he told himself, do I take it or not? Like fighting with himself if he should take it or not. And he's like, you know what? I'm not going to take it. I'm going to go for the regular class. And he ended up passing the regular class with like his teacher praising him and stuff. I literally wrote on the margin, you can only do this type of stuff if you really know yourself. Like he knew himself to the point where like, oh, I did all this stuff in life. I learned all these tricks and then I made up my own magic tricks. Like I know that I have what it takes to push myself and learn myself through this class. But if you know you're like a lazy person and you're not going to be studying extra on the weekends and staying home for Thanksgiving like he did, then no, stay in the remedial class. Like do what you got to do. But he knew himself to that point where he was like, nah, I'm gonna bet on myself and I'm gonna go. And like he totally did it. So I really, really loved how those two stories had like that same underlying thing. Like nobody's really looking, or actually how the author story reflects the astronaut stories. Like nobody was looking at all the stuff that he was doing to get to the point where he could even apply to go to NASA, versus the other guy, the author, where they were looking for those things. Like, oh, I'm looking for the underlying thing. Like, oh, I see that you taught yourself some magic tricks. That tells me that you have that thing inside you. Like, I want to learn, so I'm going to teach myself. Um, One of the other little things, a little before the end of the book, was how like Finland kept like coming on top with all these like tests that they kept throwing out, and the tests were like about this and that, like all these random tests, and they just kept coming up on top over and over and over. And then it just showed it that it was because they have, and I literally highlighted it because we don't have that here in these United States. Where it literally was like, oh, the United States has a like a winner takes all, and I literally highlighted that because I'm like, it's so true. They only look at and not just the students, but even the Jose guy, like, oh, you don't have what it takes, but this guy did so much stuff that we're gonna put all our attention and focus on him. Versus Finland had, I can't find it, but I remember it. Finland had an opportunity is here for all or something like that, like where it wasn't just whoever we see is doing well, we're gonna zone in on them and nurture their brain. It was just like, how do we all learn? And I loved how it circled back to the beginning of the book, during that same chapter where it said, that there's different ways to learn, and they really encourage all the different ways to learn. And that's how they really get like the scores they need and everything. I also loved all like the quick recap at the end, super easy. I'm gonna start doing this. I'm gonna start reading the back of the books before I start in the beginning. But we'll see. And then I did take the little test online that it asks you to take. And I came up to be, it says I'm a discomfort seeker, but I need to become an imperfectionist, is what the result told me. So I like that I took the test before I started reading the Actions of Impact, because it literally has a whole section there like how to become an imperfectionist. So um I overall I do have a different outtake on this book. I think week one I was like, whatever. And then last week with all the girls, we just was like a different whole perspective. And then to finish it off like this, I feel like, okay, I'm glad I made it through the book. The end.
Oh, I think it's been a fantastic read. This has been one of my favorite ones of recent, just 'cause I think he touched on so many different stories and applicable things here. And, as you were hitting on there, Lola, I found that this one picture is towards the very end of last week's and the beginning of this one's here. Exactly what you're talking about. This good illustration of what we are trained to celebrate, somebody getting to the top of it, versus what we should also be celebrating, somebody had to go through all sorts of hardships just to get back to the level playing field. And just looking at like, yeah, they also had to accomplish a lot. And when you look at the how much they had to climb, it's the same amount. They just had to huge reset to get back to even before they can even accelerate. And celebrating that side of it. And just a couple things from last week's, just because I was gone, that I really enjoyed from that last section there was specifically the how much better of a teacher or a learner you become when you have to become a teacher as well. And just that group of the Golden 13 and their whole story. I really enjoyed listening to that one there. And what I think was been so fascinating throughout this whole book, and kind of like the same thing you said there with the astronaut, both that one and the Chilean miner's story in this one here. The way he would kind of start a story and then add some more context, like a totally different story and lesson there, and then he'd come back and finish it. I'm sitting there on the edge of my seat. He's already told me, yeah, they rescued the Chilean miners, but it's like, how did they rescue these guys? What did they do? But using that lattice framework instead of the ladder framework of just being able to go up to an organization and the support that they had, and ultimately how they had that successful rescue, and just that 24-year-old engineer who's just throwing out an idea. Would this hammer drill bit work to be able to do it? And they're like, I don't know, but let's go find out. Like, can you present this? And the guy's like, I have no idea. I just was throwing out an idea. And ultimately, what that was able to do to help save these individuals. And, just because I'd completely forgot. Like, I remember it kind of in the news. Like, I was in college when that was going on. And, it just, reading more of these details now after the fact and after it's been dissected, just fascinating how, yeah, 2 whole months down in a cave with 7 or 33 other people, 17 days without even, being able to tell somebody you're truly still down there and you're alive. And when they finally got that first drill, like it's crazy that story of the perseverance. And yes, with Jose the astronaut and just his story of not giving up, of continuing to go back to try and get better. And when he did get through, it was the same thing. I was like, why is he telling this story? Is he just telling us that, yeah, it's okay to continue to persevere? Kind of like what he was talking about in the last section with the playwright, as she was, going through and she was getting all those horrible reviews and just like, okay, yeah, but she was constantly improving. He's just constantly improving. And then he finally got a job with NASA, but he's not an astronaut. And then he finally goes to space. Same thing. I'm sitting there like, yes, all right, he did it. And but no, just the way this book, and even from the hiring practices piece, there was just trying to keep that in mind. You're looking for what people have done, but what a better way to do it, not what they've done, what is their potential to do? And I think I'm guilty of that as I look back. Okay, what have you done already? But not, you can also be burned. You need to have a few of those little notes at the bottom, like there are exceptions to this rule and whatever. Like, don't just let it be your catch-all. But being more open-minded to finding that within candidates when I'm trying to bring people on the team, what is their true potential? Have they already peaked? Is what they have already done and what they've accomplished as much as they're going to peak? He gave that example of somebody who might have 20 years of experience, but it's just 21 years. They done like 21-year, deals there, not 21 years. And that's all the experience. And they've done the same thing 20 times. Is that really somebody you want, or do you want somebody who over 20 years has done nothing but grow? And it is going to continue to grow if they come on your team. And so looking for that potential. There were a couple of little lines that I really liked here. Let me find it here. This one was on, oh, from the teaching aspect. And I thought this, and this is what I want to ask my parents because they're both retired teachers now. And they did a few of those different. They kind of taught all sorts of different grades. My dad, what he really found was he loved second grade. My mom was fifth, but they taught everything all the way from high school down to kindergarten, everything in between. But my dad did looping a couple of those years. And as they talked about here, how that's just a common thing over in Finland. But he did that with a couple of his classes where same second grade and then third grade. And as it talked about the benefits, I would be fascinated to talk to them on like, what did they see and notice? It allowed the teachers to get to better know the students, to customize their plans, and the students to be able to build that extra trust and go through. So I think it's a fascinating concept. But I think, as they're talking about the Finland system here, and I think it's always very easy to see, oh, the grass is greener on the other side. And when he went over and was talking to the people in Finland, one of the parts I found most fascinating was they were disappointed, even though they were towards the top, but they were starting to slip, right? When you're in the middle of something, the good reminder that I got out of that is you're too close to problems so often, where you only see the issues. You don't see what everybody else is seeing as far as the successes that are taking place. And right, that's human nature. You're wanting to try to solve and get better. But sometimes it's okay to take a step back and say, like, okay, we are doing things right. Finland's being hard on themselves as they're coming off of 3 number ones at this piece of whatever test, like international competition they're in, and they're like, oh, this isn't where we need to be. And I think it's just that good reminder to always know, like, even when things are going really well, yes, we want to improve, but also stop and recognize that it is okay to acknowledge that things are going well. But to your point here as well, in the epilogue, one of the very last things that he was talking about himself, I loved this line right here. Where was it? It was, all right, give me 1 second. I had it here at the very end. It was, yes, the difference between the imposter syndrome and the growth mindset. And imposter syndrome says, I don't know what I'm doing. It's only a matter of time until everyone finds out. And the slight twist on that from the growth, I don't know what I'm doing yet. It's only a matter of time until I figure it out. And just how that subtle little twist in how you can really tell just people like they just, yeah, I don't belong here. I'm just going to get discovered and then I'm out of here versus I know I'm not where I need to be, but I can get there. And how long is it going to be till I do? And I think that was just a great summary because you always hear imposter syndrome. People have this and like, what is? I think this did a very good job of breaking that down on what the difference is between do you have imposter syndrome or do you have growth mindset? And when you feel imposter syndrome creeping in on yourself or something, now that quick little line, yeah, I don't know yet, but I can figure it out and I can get to where I need to be with everyone else. And people are going to see that and the growth and your willingness to learn and the willingness to grow and the willingness to be coachable. And I think that is very good. But no, overall, like I said, I've thoroughly enjoyed this book. Just his style of writing, it was just fun. It was an engaging one. Like literally last night, it was a little behind. I mean, it was an hour straight reading the last little bit of this last section here, and it wasn't the one where I was just getting bogged down. I mean, there's been some books where I'm like, oh geez, what like my mind wasn't wandering while reading this book, which has happened in some of the others. Like I was engrossed in it, and so a very good one. Again, kudos to whoever recommended it. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right, I'll follow. Loved this book. I loved the kind of podcast storytelling side of it. Because again, it was very engaging. I could just listen to it while kind of doing other mindless work. And still be able to take away something versus the times where I have to like sit down and highlight and all of that. So I absolutely love that part of it. But I think overall, what I really truly loved was just the fact that the positive spin, kind of that imposter syndrome versus that growth mindset concept of the positive spin on it, that potential can be found in so many different ways, avenues, whether it's through the schooling or the adversities you've gone through, there is a potential there, right? It's hiding, like the title says, that hidden potential. And it's just a matter of how that emerges and how, what you do with it, right? It wasn't so much about, is somebody else going to find your hidden potential? Is somebody else going to recognize it? Yeah, eventually, right? But it's what you're going to do with it. Where can you find that potential within yourself? And like I really resonated, I mean, truly with the last couple of chapters, just in like my own journey, thinking, okay, from the schooling standpoint, I grew up in a military family. I mean, I think we moved probably 8 times by the time I was 13. So really not going to the same schools twice, let alone having a teacher that would, loop with me, right? And so just thinking what that did, not only for, my education, I was still a good student. I loved reading. I loved, learning, but did that tap me somewhere and not really unlock a potential in me? Because I remember getting to high school and wanting to apply for certain classes and being told, oh, well, you don't have this prereq, you don't have this prereq, you didn't do this class, right? And I'm like, oh, well, it was never offered to me. I didn't know about that. And how much I had to fight for, some of the little things that I wanted to learn. I didn't want to learn math anymore. I was over it, right? I wanted to be in the classes like the yearbooks and the photos and things like that because that's where I resonated. That's what I loved. So like how much of that, right? What maybe some of my potential could have been squandered a little bit, but at the same time, what I had to do to go through that, which also was my adversity, right? That constant challenge of having to start over. And I think that taught me how to kind of start over faster, how to assimilate faster, how to adjust and pivot faster, to ultimately get what I wanted faster because I didn't know when that was going to change again, right? So whether that was through that adversity of being in the military and now how I apply it to my businesses is like, well, things can change in an instant. We need to make sure things are set, the systems, the processes. When COVID hit, yeah, I mean, it was scary and everything like that, but I had literally just the month before opened a second location for my juice bar and had to immediately pivot. A lot of people were already squandering, saying like, "Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Like nobody can buy my product." I was already like, "Okay, how do I get my product in more people's hands now with, less distraction?" We did it. A lot of companies went under during that time. We had the best 2 years of our business during that time. So I kind of looked at that where it's like some of that, okay, looking back, I can be like, oh yeah, I definitely have the potential to do this, this, and this, and I've built these skill sets that have added to those things. And I really just truly loved how he highlighted that again, just potential can be found in so many different ways. And also on the level of the hiring and the interviews. And I love that chapter. I never, even though I spent 5+ years in a human resource position, hiring people and going through all of that, the mindset that was in that chapter was very enlightening and I absolutely loved it. I found a lot of things that I definitely related to, but also things where that's not exactly how I did them because, right, I was doing them based off of what the company wanted me to do. And I just also think, how many people did we pass up that had so much potential because we had to ask the same 10 questions and maybe weren't so much allowed to kind of broaden our horizon to saying yes to certain people for positions, right? That I do find myself nowadays not in that big box mentality saying like, oh, but yeah, I heard that question, but I feel like they might have low potential. It doesn't always come down to just the uh personality trait or the characteristic trait that an algorithm gives you, right? There's more than that. And I know that like we've had multiple conversations on that because, in the insurance industry, he uses a lot of tools and resources that really help for sorting, and that they're great. They're amazing. I absolutely love them. But at the same time, I do find that it's like, oh, well, they're this trait. That's not what we're looking for. And then in my head, I'm like, oh, but I just feel like we could have that conversation because I really love this about their resume or, their answer. And I think there's more to it. Are you sure that, they wouldn't have a fit here? And maybe just in kind of enlightening us to take it one step further, to have another conversation, to think a little bit more outside of the box. Because again, potential, like we were talking about last week, isn't just linear, right? It's not just, oh, you got to go to college and achieve this and do that, and then okay, you've made it, and that's your potential. No, I mean it's really arising through the adversities, through the challenges you've worked through the things that you've taught yourself to make happen because you wanted that part, or you wanted that to be a part of your journey. And so yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed this book as a whole. I just think it gave a positive light. It's a great book for somebody who maybe is being challenged in their own self-worth or self-image of what am I good at? What's my purpose? What am I doing? I think this could really help them maybe look into those different areas of life to find what that could be for themselves. Um, if they are challenged in that. But yeah, absolutely great book.
The one other thing that she mentioned is why I love it because I always forget something else was when he brought up the family book club and how excited he was for found his kids reading. Like I love that how applicable this one. And the one thing I literally told Crystal out loud, I was like, yes, like why? When he said in high schools, it's a shame on the English teachers now because they make all these kids read the classics, which nobody wants to read. No high schooler wants to read the Odyssey or any of these other American classics. And it's like To Kill a Mockingbird and all these other ones that we had to all read in high school. If you let the kids read and choose what they actually want,
Mhm.
like what their interests are, and his whole theory on that one, you get a lot more people engaged in reading and how reading ultimately impacts so many other areas of your life. I was like, that was one I was like ready to just run through a wall for. Like, yes, I can totally agree with that statement. Like, and that was my whole
Yeah.
thing with reading. Like I said, it resonated way too close because I hated all those books. Like, I'm reading it, I'm getting no enjoyment out of it. I didn't read until book club. Like, and now we're reading all the time, and I love it. So.
But I love that part too about, Finland and the educational piece of having these projects for the students to pick what role they wanted to play. I thought that was brilliant. It's like, yeah, okay, if you find yourself more mathematically inclined and you want to jump in and you want to be the pretend CFO, man, go for it, right? Like that's awesome. And I mean, obviously we don't have kids, so I know there's a lot of things like the Montessori schools and stuff like that out there that, really dive into that kind of a thought. But at the same time, I'm like, man, why are we not doing more of that? Not only from the entrepreneurial side of things, but just life in general. I mean, maybe I know my experience was a little bit different than a lot of other people's, but I mean, I didn't even get like home ec, right? I think I moved the next year that you were supposed to have home ec. I'm like, I didn't know all that. I was self-taught how to bake and cook and all of that. And I would like to say I'm a pretty good cook at that, but the reality is like that needs to be, you know, for the United States at least, that needs to be our way of doing education because again, it's just like just what that can open up for our future, right? I think was it in this book? I don't know. I feel like I've been listening to a lot of things. I think it was in the book where he said, "Stop worrying about like your parents and making them happy and doing all of that. It's about your future. It's about like your future legacy, your future descendants and your children and things like that." And that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, man, even like shifting the education like that, it's not for the past, it's for the future. It's to give them the ability to handle common sense situations, right? Like that's not being taught right now. And I'm sure we can rant about that. But again, great book.
You can always tell when you guys like a book with how excited you guys get. I love it. I think it's great. No, because I actually I'll jump in. I also really like this book, and actually, you guys all took. I feel like we all did, well, we did read it together, right? Because I feel like a lot of the things you highlighted, Lola, when you went through everything was pretty much everything I was going through. I actually loved how everything was kind of looped back together. The last chapter, and then also in the epilogue, those are like my favorite pieces because I like how everything kind of came full circle. Crystal, you mentioned a lot of the stuff about like the, being in human resources and all that kind of fun stuff. This whole last couple chapters made me think of like I'm like a product of corporate America. I mean, I grew up in corporate America, and like right from the time before I even graduated college up through pretty much opening up my own insurance agency, and then I'm moving along with Jay. So it's really kind of crazy to kind of see how it was enlightening to hear that there are other ways to interview people, right? And so when I'm reading through this, and you're reading about the guy who opened up the call center for people with disabilities, and like how they were doing the whole interview process for them, and how it was more around like the show you around the location, get you coffee, get you tea, let you showcase the things that you want to showcase. And if you didn't do it well, you could always do a do-over. You could redo it. Like things like that, I thought were really, really great. When I was leaving Amex, well, let me back up. So when I'm with Amex for a long time, like almost 16 years, you were only able to ask the same 10 questions, like you said, Crystal. Like you had this, and you had to write down everything they were saying, and you had to be like, okay, hold on, I'm not done with your sentence yet, and you couldn't go anything off script at all. And to your point, how many people did we pass up? I mean, I know that I applied for the same job like 6 or 7 different times, and I was only able to answer the same questions every single interview the whole time. And so until I finally got it, and it was like, well, what did I say differently in this answer than I did the previous 6 times? Or like, what did they say differently? So I think being able to showcase your skills a little bit differently would have been a better process. And it wasn't until I had my own agency that I was able to start exploring those options and being able to ask different questions and allow them to do different things to be able to get a different talent pool. And so I thought that was a really unique way to look at it. And I really enjoyed some of the things that he said in here about them. And then thinking about the NASA story with the astronaut, I thought that was really awesome too, to the point of having to go through the same process over and over again. And to your Lola, you highlighted his the comment about being exception, not and he should be the rule. It's true. Like we're always going by, or at least talking about education, talking about corporate America, kind of going along with what is told we have to do. We can't go outside of this outline. You can't put your own thought and ideas into there at all. So I really enjoyed kind of how they went through that. And I really like when he was talking about going through the epilogue. Well, hold on 1 second. There was one other thing in here that he said. Um, um, Maybe not. No, the epilogue was so going into epilogue, he was talking about how he wanted to write the book, and he was telling his students that he was going to join forces with this other person that he admired for a mentor to go ahead and jump with them and be a co-write. And his students were giving him basically a hard time because they said, "That's have you listened to anything you've taught us?" And I love that he says here, the worst kind of success is achieving other people's goals. Don't live someone else's dream. And I thought that this kind of hit home for me because I did that for like 16 years. So you kind of have to like rewind and kind of rewrite your own story and kind of like go about it whatever way you feel is appropriate. And so you're living through someone else's dreams and goals. You're not really achieving what you want, and giving up a lot of the things that you want to also kind of do in your life. So that alone hit home with me, and I love how he went through and talked about the way that he kind of evolved to write the book. And Lola, you had mentioned also with the way that he had failed the writing exercise at Harvard, and so they asked him if he had to take if he wanted to take the remedial class or if he wanted to go into the regular class. And I thought that whole process and how he walked you through what he went through to get there, and kind of talking about how he threw out 102,000 words later on when he was kind of going through it, and what that meant to him and what that process kind of felt like. And Chris, you had mentioned about the whole imposter syndrome, and I thought he said here was so good at the end. He says, I now believe that the imposter syndrome is a sign of hidden potential. It feels like other people are overestimating you, but it's more likely that you're underestimating yourself. They've recognized the capacity for growth that you can't see yet. When multiple people believe in you, it might be time to believe in them. So I thought that was really a good way to look at it. We're continuing down ourselves, and the imposter syndrome comes into play so many different times. And I think that that is a really good way to look at it, where that is your hidden potential. Like there's something behind it. And that could be a good way to allow us to then explore different ways of allowing, we talked about the educational system, allow maybe to explore and allow kids to be a little bit more creative. I think a couple years ago they started what is it where kids can go do, instead of going to like a playground or whatever, it's like they go to this little mini playground with all these different jobs in there, and they can act out different jobs, and they get to play these different roles and see what they like. And these are younger kids, like, and they're like, like 5, 6 years old, going there and get to do a thing. They could be a baker, they could be a writer, they could do, whatever. And it's like a whole community of different jobs for them to different explore. I can't remember what it's called. I don't know if anybody else knows what it is, but they were able to go in there and just do these different things and just kind of explore and play around and see if anything kind of stuck with them, and be a fireman, be a police officer, things like that. So I think that that's a different way to allow kids to pick what they want. And I do think that if you were allowed to pick what you feel like you're good at, you can excel a little bit differently than what you were told. I couldn't stand reading all those books like we had to do in the summer reading. And I'm not gonna lie, I really probably never did read them much. I probably just skimmed through them. We had Cliff Notes back then, so I did a lot of Cliff Note reading. But the teachers always knew when the Cliff Note things were read, and they always knew that one question to ask on that test. But anyway, I digress. And then I like how they did the actions for impact. So I went through this whole thing. I won't bore anybody with this since we all read the same thing, but I just love a few of them that really stuck out to me throughout obviously the last couple chapters. But he says, ask for advice, not feedback. I thought that was great because, feedback is past. Advice is talking about the future. So you're forward thinking versus what you have already done. It doesn't really give you the ability to try it again, to be ready for the future, which I thought was a really good way to look at it. And then compete against yourself, measure your progress over time, not against an opponent, because the risk of competing against others is that you can win without getting better. When you compete against yourself, the only way to win is to grow. That was really great. So we always talk about competing with yourself, but we never say why. And I thought that was a really good way to kind of close it up, because you're growing when you're competing against yourself. That's the only way to win. I thought that was great. And then one other one. Is well, I kind of went over this a little bit, but the eliminate requirements for credentials and experience. Lola, you had mentioned also, like, when you went through this, like how he talked about, in corporate America, this would be a little harder to do because, again, you can only go through what the process says you can go through. You can't kind of cut corners or go outside what that page says you can do. But if you allow people to kind of to look at different things and talk about their character versus what they've done and what their accomplishments were, I think that we might have a different talent pool, and I think that that talent pool could be a better one, finding that diamond in the rough. So I really, really liked how this book ended. I liked how it went through. This might be an actual one that I would probably want to read again, just because there probably was going through some parts a little bit faster. But I really thought this was a great book. So that's where I'm at.
Any other Ron?
Well, hello everyone. The two chapters and I'll keep it condensed to the two, was mining for gold and hidden potential. Those two, using those allegorical setups, really helped me, because what I did pretty much in this book was I said, okay, there's Ron. There's Ron when he was a child. There's Ron when he was a Boy Scout and it was 30 days from San Francisco to Fairbanks, Alaska, camping with 43 other guys on a Greyhound bus. Start college, working, starting your career, moving through the career progressions, new assignments, different jobs, different companies. And ultimately came out, especially in Hidden Potential, was the job interview. You think about the job interviews, you think about some of the, I call them Mercedes crash dummy questions. They're back in the day, they weren't as crash dummy, but they'd ask you questions, and then you got the job or you didn't. In today's world, it's a bit more scientific, and it has all of that. So it has those elements. What I saw was, and then as I brought that forward with those two chapters that really highlighted for me was, you know, at this stage in my life, I'm no longer in the corporate world. I'm running 3 vertical revenue businesses now at once. I'm running a consulting, management consulting firm. I'm running LifeWave, and I'm running now a new e-commerce business. I'm not advertising, I'm just going through the pieces. And I I don't have a lot of staff, but what I have to interview for are the vendors, the people that are consulting me. And that's a really important piece in today's world, business world, that you're not so much any longer needing to hire team, which down the road I can definitely see that. But for right now, it's picking the people that lend to me with a vertical level of expertise and then the breadth and the depth of experience to be able to anticipate those kinds of, the what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? In terms of, say, because everything in today's world, being an entrepreneur, has so much to do with technical. You have to be, I mean, if it's not one app, it's multiple series of apps that you have to understand yourself because you'll be unable to articulate. And so you have to take the time. And so there is no time for imposter syndrome to be able to say, I really don't think that I can do that. I know, I'm just, and it can be very subtle language, such as, well, I don't have my degree in development. I didn't go to San Jose State University and major and do an internship with Intel or Apple, or these kinds of things. But those are very much negative, limiting beliefs that you cannot have. So, taking all of that, where I came and really began to drill down was in the mining for gold, and there were a couple of statements out on page 186, and there were a lot, but I just kept it narrow to page 186 and 187 because they had the most gold nuggets. Was when he said what was missing was a cohesive strategy. Andre began interviewing the experts on site to find out what they knew. As he listened, he learned that his original plan of entering the mine through the tunnels wasn't an option. He quickly shifted his attention to drilling and set out to appoint the right leaders to coordinate those particular efforts. And then he went on, and then following down, he said, and then due to the collapse, I won't read it all, the mine was increasingly unstable. I mean, how do you find your business? I mean, you have an issue, or you're trying to. It's not really a negative issue, but you're trying to resolve, and every step you take becomes a bit more unstable. And so it's how do you think through it, over it, under it? Do we approach this in a more of a disparate way to get out in front of it, or do we work through it? So what this did was it helped me to understand that today's world is far different than landing at Bank of America trying to convert, say, Seattle Seafirst or Seafirst Bank to Bank of America's merchant credit card program. It or trying to take Security Pacific Bank back in the day and trying to integrate that into when we wound up with Bank of America Nevada, Bank of America California, which was the golden jewel. On the consumer side, you have Oregon, Nevada, Arizona, Texas. I mean, I was constantly living in graduate school on an airplane reading, sitting in the rain. We can't leave for an hour and a half. So what did I do? I just read. So it's all of pulling these pieces together that help with that program. I felt the book was he spoke to me in his language, the way in which he articulated the discussions that were had in and around the mind. I felt that those multiple levels of discussions, with the 24-year-old kid, he's just had an opinion about something, and they go, "Can you do that in 20? And can you do a presentation in 2 hours?" How many times have you been asked on the spur of the moment to make a presentation of such a magnitude? Well, or in a situation where, can you make a presentation to X, or can you speak on that particular issue to this group of people by 9 o'clock this morning, or by 2 o'clock this afternoon? Or can you stop and not come home, but stop on your travel itinerary and stop there, change your ticket, and go there? So life is calling for these different series of adjustments that we have to make. And I felt that to be very relevant for the past, the present, and I think where we're definitely going into the future. So it's not a matter of enjoyment. Yes, that's one thing. But I found it to be a walk through my life, into the past, the present, and where I'm taking things into the future.
Well, I think it's interesting. I've been on vacation, so I haven't done my reading, but I can also say it seems like I'm reading a different book from you guys because I'm not enjoying it. I can't get into it. I find that the same thing I found 2 weeks ago, which is that he could have said things like given me a paragraph or two, and instead of it's been chapters and chapters, and I've had a really hard time focusing, and just yeah, I'm not enjoying it at all. Um, I was most recently reading about the schools in Finland, and okay, here again, I would just prefer him to say that okay, there were some tests that were done, and it was determined that teachers, instead of just saying this is the way we're going to do it, or the U.S. Canadian way, which is let's just encourage the biggest and the brightest, so to speak. We're going to make sure that everybody feels like they've got importance, and we're gonna work with everybody. To me, it could have been said in a few sentences, and I'd be like, okay, great. So I'm going to read the epilogue, though. I haven't done that, Lola. So I'm going to see if that helps me, and if it kind of brings together some of the things that you guys have said. Because I honestly feel like we're reading two different books. But admittedly, I didn't get my reading all finished this week because I was away. So the other thing, though, I can relate to is Justin and Ron. I myself used to be in merchant banking, so I worked here for the CIBC, and it was corporate banking, and I was mostly with Visa. So another day, another time, we'll have to catch up, guys, and see if we've got some similarities there. So I do feel a bit of being able to relate to you guys on that note. So that feels really good. So that's I'm kind of happy to go into the next book.
Yeah, she's definitely I'm glad this is over.
Yeah, I'm done with this one, but I'll read the epilogue. I'll get that in.
That's good. Yeah, I told you at the beginning I was like whatever, but at the end these stories, I think you're kind of like me in the sense where you're like, bro, just give me the information quick. Like I'm like that with texting. When people try to screen my text, like, hey Lola, I don't even reply. I'm like, bro, just text me what you want. Like, that's what texting is for. But I think that's when you have that, but like book-wise,
That's the TikTokification of the world today.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
It's true. It's true. But all right, guys. Well, we're done with this book. I already updated on Facebook. If you don't have your book, the link is on Facebook as well, and I'll put it in the team chats and stuff. And then next week we just cover the first. You were saying something, Chris?
75.
I was just gonna say, so I've got this one ordered, and then I'm just trying. Is the one after this like, and I got this one as well. I ordered up. Is the one after this one, or is it another one in between these two?
Let me double check. I feel like it
I
says
do.
the creative act, but that's the one. That I think that's the one that Jade did never told me the author specifically, like who it was. So I'm gonna follow up with him today when he lands.
Okay.
And then we'll decide like if we would do the creative pact or the simple path. But whatever we decide, I'll let you guys know in the chat too.
Okay.
Well, and I'm looking at this one here. I mean, it's 280 pages, so this will absolutely be a 4-weeker
Yeah.
if that's how. So the last one a little short, but no, that's perfect.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Awesome.
Awesome, guys. Thank you guys so much. Have a good rest of the week, and we'll see
See you,
you later.
beautiful people. Thanks so much. Have a
Absolutely.
good week.
Bye, everybody.
See you guys. Take care.